All right. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Ready to get started?
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Ready. Let's do it.
Let's introduce our guest.
You right now? We'll do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, Chris, welcome to our podcast. Thank you so much for spending your day to come here. You have a really interesting story, and there's a lot of layers to this, so we're going to take a little bit of time to go through this, but you have had I'm going to use the term that you shared with me, an adventurous career in the military. You were a fighter jet pilot for a career in the military, and then you have a really compelling story to share about your son that on December 27th, 2020, he was 17 years old, passed away from fentanyl overdose. Actually, fentanyl poisoning is what happened, where you found him and tried to revive him. And that has transpired into you being a co-sponsor of Prop 36. And in the state of California, most of you may know this, the Alexandra's admonishment. You were one of the ones that actually created this admonishment. So thank you for being here. There's a lot to talk about. We are really thrilled. The platform is yours. Chris, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mark and Kyle. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here on Shots Fired and share our story. I do believe in helping others. Their serving doesn't require a uniform, and I think a lot of law enforcement, military, first responders, fire, when you go through that training and that journey of being in your career and you retire and move on, you still serve in ways you can. I really like to give a disclaimer that if we get, depending on how far we delve into Zach's story, I do have disclaimers. And the first one is this: the whole discussion with fentanyl or drugs, death-related stories from a drug. More and more people in our communities are affected by that, and there's usually someone in the audience that has some kind of story that they are connected to involving a drug-related incident that may have resulted in harm on someone they care about. And I don't want to be triggering. I don't want to, kind of make it difficult. But this really is something we have to talk about because there's so many people dying every minute or every hour, I guess. And for those in the audience that may have a connection there, I want you to know that my heart goes out to those in your audience that have that challenge, and we are all in this together. I like the other disclaimer is this is not an easy topic. It's cuts very close to the core for me, and it's hard. It can get emotional to the viewers and for me, obviously, but I'm used to that. Grief has its own schedule, and sometimes I need a minute to just let it pass. But I've learned so much, and it's so important. And I like to quote Charlie Plumb, who is a revered Vietnam prisoner of war, who is a prisoner tortured for almost 7 years, who was repatriated. And I like how he says it. Adversity is a horrible thing to waste, and we can all benefit from those journeys, and I absolutely stand behind that sentiment. And so I'm very eager to share and to learn. And a lot of my military background, I think, helped me significantly on how to survive these days and become the advocate that I have been in my advocacy work. So I'm grateful for that.
I really like that quote. I've never heard that, and it couldn't be more true when you said that, because I think without adversity, you really can't or don't grow as a person, dealing through hard times and really kind of like what shapes you into the person that you are, and
Absolutely.
and managing those things. So I never heard that. I really like that. Thank you for sharing that. Let's start with your military background, and then we'll get into the story of Zach.
Sure.
So you have a super unique background in the military, a jet fighter pilot. My brain's going to Top Gun. Like, we'll get into that. But and then it's funny because I didn't know this until just before we started recording, because I fly a lot. We travel, and I tend to watch Top Gun too on the flight,
Yeah,
and
it's an
sometimes I'm
awesome
like,
movie.
man, put me in that cockpit, like, and then I find out you're a United Airlines pilot. So we'll get into all that, but tell us about your military background.
Sure.
What got you in the military, when you served, and what you did.
Well, my dad was a pilot, a corporate or civilian corporate pilot. He took me flying when I was 10, and I caught the bug. And I knew I really want to fly. And I told my dad, hey, Dad, when I grow up, I want to fly. And he smiled and said, son, you can't do both. You have to pick one or the other. But I knew that I had to go down that path. I went to an air show. My mom took me at Mather and saw the Blue Angels fly, and I just fell in love. I thought, I want to fly jets. And one of the pathways to get there is to go to a service academy, so West Point, Annapolis, or the Air Force Academy, to become a commissioned officer. To be a pilot, in the military, you need to have a commission. You need to have a college degree to get a commission. But if you go to the Air Force Academy, most of those graduates go into pilot training. So that was my number one choice. I actually didn't get in the academy the first year. Kind of crazy story what happened. But basically it was a mix-up of medical records, and apparently they thought I was legally blind in my left eye and I had asthma, and said,
What?
I will never fly ever. And I had to fight that. And it took me a year, and I got in, and they said, you had a miracle recovery. I said, because the first time you looked at me, someone mixed up those records.
Gosh.
Oh, so you don't have asthma?
No,
And you're
Never
not a
had
blind
it.
pilot? That's
oh my
good.
God.
no. This is 1985 when I was first auditioning for the service academies, and you have this long medical exam that's an all-day thing. Think of the movie The Right Stuff, when those first astronauts were getting thoroughly examined by medical doctors all day. It was like that. And sometimes the paperwork gets lost in the shuffle, and they said, here are the results. And I knew that wasn't correct. Because I played football in high school. I played track. I was very fit. And the doctors who examined me said, you're 100% pilot qualified. But in any case, that just delayed my journey. I did get to the academy. I got out in the class of 91. I went to pilot training in Texas, and then I flew a career in the Air Force. Had 3 kids, and I loved it. I actually flew airlift first. After Desert Storm, there was a major drawdown of everywhere in the military, particularly pilots. And they turned the fighter and bomber pipeline completely off for 3 years. And in the infant wisdom of the institutional pantheon of the Air Force manpower, they realized, oh shit, we're shorthanded fighter pilots. So they offered a first centralized crossflow board to let non-fighter pilots apply for a fighter. And I did. I flew airlift in Europe for 4 years. I threw my name in the hat to be one.
What's an airlift?
So, good question. In the military, when you graduate pilot training, you're one of 4 basic categories: airlift, tanker, fighter, bomber. And if you become an airlift pilot, you're flying like C-5, Galaxy, the C-17, C-130. These are cargo flights, cargo planes that fly around. A tanker is an air refueling tanker. A fighter or bomber, as you can kind of figure it out. And once you go down that track, you pretty much stay in that track for most cases. And so if you're down any track and it's not a fighter track, you never go into a fighter track later. But never happened before. The Air Force decided to have a crossflow for anyone who wants to go into fighters. And I don't know how many people applied for that board. I heard there was a lot, but they selected 25 people. 11 went to the F-15C model, single seat, and 11 went to the single seat F-16, and 3 went to the Strike Eagle, which was my number one choice. That was a newer fighter. It's kind of all high tech, and it does a lot of stuff. And I'm so thankful to have gotten that opportunity. So I have a little bit of the airlift type of military experience, but most of my military, about 15 to 16 years was the fighter world. And I loved it. I absolutely was surrounded by giants, amazing Americans that were very patriotic. They were sharp. They were wicked smart, top of their class. And they just showed me, okay, there's a right way to do jobs, and there's a half-assed way to do a job. And anything but your absolute best won't work here, or you're not going to be around. Right now, the Air Force has, on average, around 1,000 fighter pilots, and that's about 10% of all of their pilots, about 0.01% of all of Air Force people. So being a fighter pilot, you're part of a very, very small group or a demographic of Air Force people. And as you can imagine, flying a fourth generation or fifth generation fighter, a modern fighter, that's worth a lot of money, but you're getting to do some things literally at the tip of the spear. People are going to do everything they can to get there, and it's extremely competitive to get in. But once you're in, and I got a lot of motivation from the older guys who were showing me, this is how we do this mission. It was very inspiring. I feel like I owe a lot of credit to them to be my very best and to try to figure how do I get better. And it's very competitive. And I now know why, because once you go against an opposition force and you're putting your life on the line, it really counts. You have to be your very best. So,
wow, those numbers shocked me. Actually, I would have never thought it was that low of actual fighter pilots. That's pretty incredible. And in fact, that you were one of them, that is really cool. What does one of those planes cost?
It varies. The F-16, I think, started at $30 million. F-22 is probably the most expensive, around $150 million to $200 million. The new Strike Eagle EX, because they still build Strike Eagles, is pushing around $100 million per copy. So
wow, you are super humble and you're just really mellow about it, and you're describing
like no big deal.
This seat that you sat in was for the elite, the 0.1%, incredibly smart and intelligent people, but that's you. So what is you're describing that these people are so competitive and have so much drive, but we're sitting across from someone that has that. So what is that drive? Like how, I can't even form a sentence to talk about this, but like how did you have that drive? Like what got you through that? It has to be hard.
Sometimes I apologize too, and sometimes we do deal with Mark not able to formulate plans. And anybody that watches the show knows that Mark will blame. He had a stroke, a long time ago, and he blames it on that. So we just got to bear with him. I'm kind of like I'm his wingman.
Okay.
And you'll see where I'll have to be his wingman. But where's the drive? Like, what's the drive? The internal.
I think that if you don't have the drive, you're not going to make it. You're not going to get through the program. And I know you understand, because it's very similar to becoming a firefighter or law enforcement, CHP, police, sheriff, first responders. There's you kind of have to go through your training, and if you're not really driven, if you're not motivated, if you don't have the passion within you, like I really want this, it's going to be evident to the instructors, and they're going to see you a student who has. They're lacking drive. They're not going to get through the program. As far as getting through pilot training, that was hard, and a lot of student pilots didn't make it through, and it was mainly because they really didn't have it in their heart. So, for me personally, like I mentioned earlier, I caught the bug when I was a kid, and I just saw these air shows, and as a senior, right as I was getting ready to start the academy journey, Top Gun came out, Top Gun 1, and that just added fuel to the fire of passion.
Was it the motorcycle scene?
Yes, and no. And I did have a motorcycle too. But,
oh gosh,
of course you did.
But I
played volleyball too.
I think. No, I did not.
In jeans with no shirt.
Don't
lie.
Chris, it's fine. It's fine.
No, those are firefighters.
Yeah.
That's the Navy. But anyways, I think for me personally, it was just having seen it and just been inspired. I don't know really how to describe it, but I will tell you my passion to any other guy that I got to work with, it's different. It's unique. It's their own uh, take on it. And once you know weed out those who aren't really passionate about it, and what's left that actually gets through the program, I mean, they have their kind of coming to Jesus. Do I want this or do I not? And if I don't make this program, if I don't pass, what am I going to do? What's my identity? Will there be shame, or should I not be here? Am I going to kill myself? Am I going to kill someone else? I really have to be here for that, you know, to know I can do it right. And once those people have that, you know, introspection and get through the program and graduate, what's left is some really humble, motivated, and very sincere professionals. These are guys that don't, you know, brag. It's not the old, you know, overly aggressive, overly ego. Most of the pilots I've had the privilege to work with are very humble and very contributory to your goals, to your journey. If they think, hey, I can help you out with that. I saw what happened in our dogfighting training sortie today. Let me describe how to react to this scene. If you see this, then try that. If you see that, then try this. And let's practice that. Next time we'll go and fly, we'll set us up for this. And then you kind of mentor. There's a lot of mentoring going on so that we are all better. You know, as you know the saying, all ships rise and high tide. So why not, you know?
I think you see that at all elite levels, or even in our profession, guys that have credibility or have done things, and you know they're always willing. They're not the guys that are like pounding their chest, war story, ego. You know, usually they want to help other people.
Right. Yeah.
So I can see that for sure, especially at that level. Is there you get deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Afghanistan, or just one or the other?
I had three. I was deployed in the Balkans during the 90s and Iraq. And then my last one was Afghanistan after 9/11, obviously.
Yeah. Is there a mission or something that stands out amongst all three deployments where you're like, that was hairy?
Yes.
I'm sure you have several.
Very much so. Iraq was my first real experience of seeing an integrated air defense system that was robust and very active. I was a wingman, so kind of new to the squadron. I just finished my Strike Eagle training, and I was about 8 months old in the squadron. When you're new to an outfit, you start out as a wingman, and then you upgrade to a 2-ship flight lead, and then you upgrade to a 4-ship flight lead. The upgrade to 2 ships about a year and a half, and that's a big jump. And then 4-ship would be maybe 6 months after that. And for those few, you might be asked to be an instructor, but that's a rare thing. So I'm a 8-month-old wingman, and we sent a handful of jets to Turkey, and I'm the only wingman from my squadron being asked to go. Everyone else is a 2-ship or 4-ship. Most were instructors. And I think they wanted to have a token wingman go just so they can make it look good, and certainly provided invaluable service. And it was the very first sortie that I will never forget, because when you spend all of your time and energy and heart into getting into a college program to get your degree, and then get your commission, and then you compete for pilot training, and then you get through pilot training, and you want to be at the top of pilot training. Pilot training is about a year long. And then you get into a fighter, and then you compete with that, and then you survive that. There's a lot of man hours going on with instructors, contractors, maintenance people, supervisors helping you succeed. But when you go across the line, turn the master arm on, there are people who want to kill you. They don't want you to succeed. And when you experience that, you have an emotional experience. You're like, holy fuck, these guys aren't here to help me. succeed. They want me dead. And when you first deployed, and I have to admit, I was premature or immature about that. Like, I finally get to show what I'm made of. I worked so hard doing all of these things. I'm the only wingman being allowed to go do this compared to all the other wingmen in our squadron. And how cool is that? Now I can not only prove to just me, but everyone who's helped me succeed that I can do what you taught me to do. I want to show I'm good enough. But that first flight, when we were targeted and shot at, it's an emotional experience. And it never goes the way you plan and train.
Yeah.
That first incident where you see rounds coming up at you, and now you have to react to that. A lot of emotions come to play, and anger was definitely there. And now I'm pissed. And so we do our job, we react, so they miss, and then we retaliate, because the rules of engagement is our mission was to patrol the no-fly zone. And so we won't drop or do anything or target anyone unless we're shot at. Then we retaliate, as long as the impact is within 10 minutes. That was the rules of engagement at the time. After that sortie, my motivation changed dramatically. Instead of being there to prove to the world I'm good enough, my motivation changed instantly. And I didn't even expect to have that emotion. My mission or my motivation was, I need to make sure Mark, Kyle, all my other friends come home, because I know your wife, I know your kids, I know we're all friends in our squadron, and I'll be damned if I'm going to be in a forward deployed location and allow someone who wants to kill us and takes their first shots. They're the ones making the first shots that are being fired. And so we're going to defend and protect our brothers and sisters here. Screw you, but I will not allow you to do that. And so my motivation wasn't about me. It was about them, so that we can protect each other, because I want you to come home and arrive alive. And that absolutely is transformative to me. As far as the most harrowing thing, Afghanistan did not have a very robust air defense system, as you can imagine. But what was more dangerous than that was the ground, the terrain, and strafing, which involves taking your airplane and pointing it about 30 degrees to 45 degrees nose low, shooting the gun at that. I didn't realize the significance of that threat until I got there. And I can qualify that. Have you guys been to Afghanistan before?
I have not, no.
Okay, so I'm going to qualify by doing a comparison here. Obviously, the United States has a lot of mountains. The Sierras, our backyard, the Rockies. Do you guys know what the tallest mountain in the United States is?
Ooh, the United States?
Mark
tried to call out the one in California and was wrong.
Chris, just so you know, I'm going to step out of this and just listen because I pulled a couple
stats,
interesting things, and asked some trivia questions. And I said, what's the lowest?
Well, highest altitude
and the lowest.
And you were wrong on both.
Yeah, and I was wrong on both. It's not sea level. Death Valley is actually lower than sea level. So whoever corrected me, I got it. So you'll just have to educate me.
Yeah, that's right. Afghanistan was very different, and I didn't really understand the significance of it until I got there. So we were talking about the biggest mountains in the U.S. Mount McKinley / Mount Denali in Alaska is our tallest mountain in all of the U.S. It's, I think, around 20,100 feet tall. The second tallest mountain is around 18,006 feet or something like that. I don't remember the name of it. It was in my notes, but that's our second tallest mountain. In all of the lower 48s, it's here. Mount Whitney's 14,505 feet. So we have probably around 50, 55 mountains in all of the U.S. that are over 14,000 feet. We have an 18,000 footer, and we have one 20,000 footer. Afghanistan, let's talk about that. There are 5 peaks over 20,000 feet. There are 22 peaks over 18,000 feet and hundreds over 14,000 feet. There are known, they have, I believe it's 1,596 peaks registered in Afghanistan.
Wow.
What?
So we have one 18,000 footer in the U.S., one 20,000 footer. They have a lot more. But here's the thing to really bring it to perspective. That's about 80% of the country. Well, that country is about the size of Texas. So if you could take 1,600 peaks, of which hundreds are over 14,000, 22 are over 18,000, and 5 are over 20,000, and compress all that in about 80% of the size of Texas, you're going to get some terrain you just don't normally see. The highest peak in the lower 48 is 14.5 at Mount Whitney. The highest peak in the Alps is Mont Blanc, and I think that was around 15,500 feet. Those are big mountains, but when you go to Afghanistan, they're much bigger and more compressed.
Mm-hmm.
So what you get is a really big sawtooth kind of thing. So most of the ridge lines, or I shouldn't say ridge lines, but the terrain has at least 30 to 60, about 45 degrees steep. So the switchbacks are going back and forth a lot. And it goes way down in the valley, goes way up and way down and way up. Well, when you're responding to a TIC, which stands for Troops in Contact, that's when U.S. friendlies are engaging in an opposition force. Whoever shoots first, it doesn't matter. They're in contact. And they are overwhelmed or outnumbered, U.S. or our coalition partners. They call 911. When I was deployed there, we were basically there providing armed overwatch, armed escort, armed recce. We were flying with at least a 2-ship of Strike Eagles 24/7 for several years.
So there's just 2 planes that are up circling in the event a team needs help.
Right. And typically we were stationed at Bagram Air Base, so at the very southwest part of the Hindu Kush Mountains. Most of these terrain features that I described was in the Hindu Kush. And the airport base elevation was about 5,500 feet, so a little higher than Denver. And we would take off out of there, and we would usually take off with some kind of assigned mission, whether it's armed reconnaissance or escort. But if any military force, U.S. or a coalition partner, gets in a TIC situation, and oftentimes it was an ambush kind of story where they would have a convoy of up-armored Humvees or MRAPs, and there's a bunch of RPGs or an IED, and then they're surrounded by 100 Taliban or Al-Qaeda or other insurgents. They're 20 versus 120 is way outnumbered. And so they would immediately call, we would be redirected to go over there and help. Well, oftentimes that happened at night, and oftentimes these guys were around 12 to 15,000 feet, which is really high, but the top of the train's 24,000 feet or 22,000 feet. So they're 10,000 feet below the top of the mountain, and there's another mountain right next to it that's almost as tall. So they're kind of in this valley. And so when you're flying an airplane going Mach 1 at night, there's always clouds, by the way.
Yeah,
What?
that sounds terrifying.
It's a rather emotional event,
Yeah.
and it's scary. So what's challenging is that the intervening terrain made it difficult to talk to these guys until you had better line of sight. So you had to basically be over on top of them because there's several mountains between you and them, and for you to have direct line of sight, unless they use SATCOM and relay through a SAT radio, which we had SAT, you weren't really able to talk to the guys on the ground until you got very close to them. And usually by then, their situation had advanced, I should say, deteriorated pretty bad, and now they're getting really desperate. And that's the biggest challenge was, okay, I have to be very respectful to the terrain that's around us because it's so aggressive. There's always cloud formations and weather activity around all of the mountains. We would call it cumulogranite, because there's a mountain right next to that cloud. You can't just fly in a cloud. You have to be very careful. And when we make contact with, we call them a JTAC. There's different terms, but basically that's the dude who would be on a radio to coordinate air support if needed. So when they pull the trigger to call 911 and say, we have a tick, we need air support, we go as fast as jet lets us, which gets us there fairly quick. But now we have to sort out, where's the terrain? How does it work? If we were to do a pass, what's the optimum direction? Where are the friendlies? Where are the bad guys? I don't want to drop anything over the heads of friendlies or shoot a gun along the, 6 or 12 o'clock of friendlies. I need to come at a different angle. And that the mountains made it difficult. The most challenging part is when you finally connect with these guys and they're screaming. You hear Kalashnikovs, you hear AKs, explosions. I remember one JTAC was trying his best and he stopped talking. And what sounded like a 16-year-old boy, he's probably 19 or 20, he's a JFO, basically the backup, which means Joint Fires Officer, said the JTAC just got shot in the jaw and his face is hanging off. He can't talk. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell you. So he's basically very emotional, and what we're seeing from up above, we want to help, but we don't know where to help, and we don't want to kill friendlies. We don't want to commit fratricide. We need to help save them, and so an emotional, or I should say, a very difficult part of that is to help him tell me what I need to know. We call it a 9-line. So there's 9 lines of information that gives us all the information we need. And then we need to get permission. Okay, we have all the information. We know where friendlies are. We know where bad guys are. We know the desired weapon effect you want. So you agree to this weapon, this fuse setting, or this gun, run-in direction, or whatever. And we're ready. And then they say cleared hot. That's the last thing we hear before we actually roll in and shoot or drop bombs. And we basically coach them, okay, I need you to tell me this, then this, then this to fill out our 9-line. And he's really crying. He said, we've got multiple wounded. We got at least one, if not many, KIA. They're going to overrun us any minute now. We're basically, we're fucked. And I can't remember the exact name, but I do remember him saying something like, once we finished that 9-line, he said, my wife is named Jessica. My daughter's named Cindy. Tell him I love him. You're cleared and hot. And he's convinced we're not going to survive. And that's when we were doing our strafing runs because they were too close. We can't drop a bomb on that. The frag pattern of the bomb or weapons effects will kill a lot of people. So we had to be surgical by shooting the gun. And that's another very scary, crazy thing because of how close and how fast you are to the ground at night in this big mountainous terrain. It's a really stressful thing. It's very uncomfortable. It's the most uncomfortable experience I've ever had in an airplane. But when you hear that and you hear screaming in the background and you hear all the commotion, you want so bad to help. And it's very difficult to not let your, how should I say, adrenaline kind of take over. And unfortunately, I've seen this many times in Iraq and Afghanistan. And sadly, there are times when fighter pilots were just letting, like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to help you. And they were too low or too steep or too late. And they just hit the ground and killed themselves. My last deployment, one of our jets, every deployment I've had, we've had guys not come home. I've had a dozen friends trying to do their best to do their job. All 12 of them didn't come home because they were having a hard time with controlling their emotions. And rightfully so. If you're in an area and your friends are getting hurt, you're going to want to do what it takes to stop. But you have to be controlling. You have to control the situation. You have to control your emotions to be successful. The strafing part, we can go into that in more detail if you're interested, but you're intentionally putting you and the jet within about 2 seconds of crashing. But you have to do that to get the desired weapons effects. So if you're too early, it's not going to work. If you're too late, well, you probably aren't coming home.
Yeah.
And that's every time. It's like every pass, you come off the pass and do your safe escape maneuver. It's like, oh my gosh, I really don't like this. But then when you hear on the radio, good shot, good hit, or whatever the terminology that organization uses, and now they're able to regroup, get better cover, get in their MRAPs, or get into a place that now they're going to survive the night, then it's very fulfilling and very
I bet.
much relief.
So in that case, I'm curious, like, what is that the maneuver that you guys ended up using to help these guys, or how'd that turn out?
So dropping a bomb, there's different size bombs, obviously creates a lot of devastation and destruction. But when the resistance forces or opposition forces got smart, and they're like, we got to be close to these guys. Most of the, we worked with Marines, with Army, but almost all the time up in the big Hindu Kush, we were working with Spec Ops. So Rangers, SEALs, pararescue, because they like to operate in smaller forces. They're very agile. They're very good. They're very skilled, and they're outstanding. I loved working with them. I probably should have prefaced this with, before we deployed to Afghanistan, we did something called Green Flag out in Las Vegas area, where we did an exercise for 2 weeks with those guys. They were deploying at the same time we were deploying. So we got to know them, work with them, and do strafing passes in Lone Pine next to Mount Whitney to try to get near a big mountain, the biggest we have in the lower 48s, which pales compared to Afghanistan. But, we wanted to learn their call signs, their techniques, how they give us the 9-line. So we knew these guys. We recognized these guys. And we met a number of them while we were at this exercise. And we're like, okay, we'll see you next month. We're going to be deploying next month. We all go there and we work with these guys. The strafing pass is the most surgical strike because you're shooting bullets. They're about as tall as a Red Bull. The gun shoots it at 6,000 rounds a minute. So it's going to leave a mark.
Wow.
And it's something that can be very precise as long as you do the pass correctly. Because of the mountains, the desired weapons effects that we want, the best, most optimum plan or attack plan is to strafe at about 30 degrees. So the nose is pointing down here. Well, when you're already going around 350 to 400 knots, so about 400 to 450 miles an hour, and you dip the nose that steep, you're going to accelerate. And that's what you want. You want to bring momentum with these bullets, and you open fire at a certain range. If you open fire too early, the gun spins so fast, the 6-barrel cannon, it fans out the rounds. And of course, air is going to cause the bullets to slow down. And so if you shoot from the bozosphere, the bullets are just going to fall and not really do anything. If you shoot the gun 50 feet from the target going 500 miles an hour, those bullets are going to be nice and tight right before your plane hits that.
Yeah.
So where's the optimum point where I'm going to open fire knowing the bullets are still going to have tight groupings and then cease fire? We usually pull it's 6,000 rounds a minute, so you only hold the trigger for a half second to no more than a second. And then at the ceasefire, your minimum range of shooting, then you do this safe escape maneuver. It's a 5G or greater. And if you do it right, you'll bottom out by 500 feet. But oftentimes, because you may be a little steep, a little fast, a little late, it's regular. We would see us bottom out at around 300 feet. Well,
That's the height. That's the length of a football field standing up.
right. But you're going from this way to this way. Now, if there's a mountain right here and you're doing this, and you got to climb 12,000 feet at 300 feet next to this mountain, you're going to have to work your way up above the peak of the mountain. And the only way to do that is to go into full afterburner. Well, that is a beautiful 50 plus 69-foot long blue flame. and there's two of these engines. And so it lights up and turns dark into day. And most of the time it's like, oh God, here we go. You do this recovery, you see, as you're up here when you start, it's all black. But as you get to open fire, you start to see trees and boulders and rocks kind of coming at you really fast. So that's enormously distracting. Once you cease fire and you do your safe escape maneuver to climb out of that, you see the trees whizzing by a couple 100 feet or 500 feet below you as you're trying to outclimb this mountain, and it's a big blue glow behind you. And all the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, resistance forces see this, and that's just come shoot at me.
Oh, yeah.
And we saw that. We'd see the RPGs, we see the tracer fire from some rifle, small arms rifle. The RPGs would blow up in between because the F-15 has two tails. You see the blue flame behind it if you look directly behind you, and then you see these as you're trying to climb away from the terrain.
God.
So we much prefer daytime, but the resistance or the opposition force knows that it's so much more difficult for us at night, and that's the only time they would really try to take ambush opportunities is at night. Of course, people are wearing NVGs. We're wearing NVGs if it works, but it still doesn't make it any easier. So to answer your question, that was probably the most stressful, exciting, if you want to use that word, very uncomfortable experience I've ever had in the Strike Eagle.
That's wild.
Chris, that's why you're a pilot or a fighter pilot, because you're smart and you still, at the end of that, remember what Kyle's question was. Because when you're like, to answer your question, I was like, oh, what was this question?
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Damn,
that's
I'm honored to sit here next to you. That is
dude,
wild. I've never talked to
I got C's and sometimes D's in class, so I'm not that smart.
That's
just
okay. We did too.
Suburbanite.
Yeah.
I'm just an average suburbanite soccer
No,
dad.
seriously, that is really interesting.
When we talked earlier, you talked about like discipline and integrity. And can you talk a little bit about that and how that affected you and your military career, and then how that relates to now? Because for Kyle and I, just being cops, like discipline and integrity is just, it's
just a word.
It's just a word. Yeah. And people are like, oh, integrity. It's just doing the right thing when no one's around. But can you share? Because you really know what that is. And I think all of our listeners could really benefit from that.
I acknowledge that. I was put in situations most people don't or have been involved in, but it takes a lot of self-discipline and integrity to be able to be successful at your job. So if you're not disciplined enough to learn the skills you need to learn on what to say or what to do or what not to do in a certain situation, if you don't have the discipline to master those skills, then you're probably going to make a mistake. And if you make a mistake, then people get hurt. Most people who work, and not to, distance myself from someone working at Chick-fil-A or being a Lowe's manager or whatnot, but if you make a mistake and you recategorize something incorrectly, it's on the wrong shelf, it's a mistake. It can be fixed. But if you're in harm's way and you're asked to do something that puts your life, in some cases, within 2 seconds of not surviving, but you have to do it that way, you really have to be careful, and you need to feel confident. I am mastered this skill to do this correctly, to do this successfully. If you don't have discipline to really try to be extremely good at it and be professional, then it's not going to be successful. At some point, you're going to kill yourself or hurt someone. you're shooting the wrong target. And so the discipline is to ensure mission success. The integrity piece, when I went to the Air Force Academy, our first full day after we woke up, they made our entire class of 1,000 freshmen go out to the terrazzo, and they wanted us to do the oath. And all other cadets, the sophomores, juniors, and seniors were there, and we're all in formation. And it was a way to demonstrate we take this seriously. We are witnessing you make your oath. And when it came to the honor code part of that, we will not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate among us anyone who does. And we were like brand new first day on the job as a freshman, getting yelled at with fresh cut buzz cuts and all that, and starting basic training.
You do have amazing hair. I'm glad you didn't shave it compared to Kyle.
You have amazing beard.
Oh, thanks. This is
compared to ours.
a fierce beard. Yours is a real short and tight, and Kyle's a little longer and trying to be a little rebel. And I know mine's a little out of control, but
well, thank you, by the way. But I thought, okay, really, does it matter? I mean, I'll try to be honest, but they were hardcore. It's black or white. There's no exceptions. And it really was inconvenient. I could have gotten an A instead of a C+ if I had known the test in advance and taken a shortcut that I'm sure happens on college campuses throughout the U.S., but at the service academies, that if you do that and are caught, you're done. You're out. And so it's like, well, I actually have to study. Damn, and that's hard. And
Chat GPT wasn't around back then.
Yeah, I know. And exactly. But it wasn't until I deployed that I realized, okay, now I see. If someone tells me do this now, I do it. I don't. Someone who I work with, I trained with, I'm deployed with, I know is skilled at their job. If they say, CJ, go right now, or left, or up, or down, or slow down, or whatever, don't drop, or drop. I will do it because something is going on I don't know about, and they're trying to help me, and I've seen that repeatedly. I remember a story in Iraq where I was number 3, number 2 is to my left, and number 1 is between us, so we're flying in a 3-ship like this, and number 2 screamed. Basically, they're shooting at us, and I'm looking to my left, my backseater, Super Dave, it's his call sign. He's like, what's Zappa yelling about? We don't see anything over there. Well, what's happening is the stuff is right over here to my right, and I didn't see it because I recognize who's on the radio. He's over to my left, so I naturally look left, but then lead says, he tells me to maneuver my jet in the direction it needed to go. And I thought, oh shit. And I just maneuvered, and no kidding, it's like your wall here. It was all black. They shot at us with these things called a BM-21, which is a modified artillery, surface artillery, and just lit the sky black. And it got really close to our jet. And had I not done that, I would have been hit. Wow. And so I'm like, I don't want to go over there because he's screaming, they're shooting at us. Do I want to go in that direction? Well, the other guy says, go in that direction. And it took me a few seconds. So I looked to the right and I thought, oh shit, this is bad over there. And it confirmed you really have to trust people. And to do that, to be one who is trusted by your teammates, you have to have extreme respect to personal integrity. Otherwise, if they don't trust you, you're not going to be invited. You're not going to be part of their program. You're not going to stick around.
That's an interesting way to look at it from your perspective. I can't even believe we didn't ask this, but what's your call sign?
I know. I was writing a note right now about it.
I had 4.
Really?
Yeah, there was a B course one. They called me Biff. Most of the B course when you're a student are kind of funny and comical, but when you get to your operational squadron, my first one was Foghorn. which is a really cool story. Then I got lucky for that BM-21 incident. They said, you are renamed lucky for this deployment because it was around you. And I said, it was above, below, front and aft, just to the right of my airplane. It was a wall. And I can talk more about how big of a threat it was, but it was, 40 rockets per truck, and there were 5 trucks. So 200 of these things.
Holy smokes.
All over the sky. And then I got my last call sign was CJ.
Interesting.
So that's the one I ran with most of the time.
I made no,
I like
well,
Biff.
other than I started writing that, but I wrote down 2 things. Well, discipline, but to be trusted. So, I mean, this is a law enforcement based podcast for everyone, but the discipline part, I look at that and think back when we were in the academy and they're yelling at you to stand in formation, put your feet together, and your hands aren't right at your gig line. And it's like little minute details. And when you said all that, like none of that really ever computed and added up to,
Like, why are we doing it?
yeah,
Right.
no
Yeah.
one,
I
no
had
one,
the same experience during basic. Like, what does this matter?
Why
yeah, but no one
marching and all
explains that. And it's like 20 years later, you're really detailing in a well thought out form that all of that stuff, like you even said, like you have to master all the little things because that like adds up. And I think that could translate to any job.
Absolutely.
And being really good at it and having discipline, you want to, and you should be really good at all the small things. And then the other thing that stood out was to be trusted. I think that's really unique because you think like, oh yeah, I'm trusted. People trust me, but what is to be trusted? And I look at a couple of the guys that was on my SWAT team that I used to make entry with. One was my partner. Like I trusted him. And it's just interesting that you just talked about that it has to be an honor to have someone that you are tight with, but is trusted. Like you trusted that person. Was it something Davey? His call sign?
Well, my backseater was Super Dave.
Super Dave.
The guy, it wasn't him. It was, yeah, you know who I'm talking about. But it was Rooster. That was the flight lead who told me that.
Yes. To completely trust that, to make a decision that you might thought didn't make sense.
If you were an entry, you mentioned when you were on SWAT, one of you called it entry teammates.
Yeah.
If you went in the door and you believe there's a threat right over there, but he tells you go there now and you trust him, and you do, and then you realize you're about to get shot right here with a shotgun that you didn't see. And it'd be like, thank you, dude.
Yeah.
If I had said, I don't want to go there because I think there's a threat there, then you'd be dead. You wouldn't have survived that. So it's important to know that if you're going to go and put yourself in harm's way, and the guys on your team whose job is to look here or look there or to clear this or clear that you want to trust them, but you also want to be the guy that's trusted.
Yeah.
So that, hey, I know my job. I think if you have personal integrity, good discipline, and that they know that you're handling your weapons flawlessly, they know that you know how to use them without risk or a chance of them getting hurt by accident because of an accidental discharge or anything like that. I trust Mark. I trust Kyle. I know he knows how to handle this weapon, and I know when he says, I'm going to take care of this zone, I trust that. And when people trust you, I think it affects the overall team success, that it's going to get done right. So it's important to foster it, and it's important that everyone knows, hey, we trust each other, to the point where, I'm risking my life to trust them. And if the team can't get to that, then it's really not ready yet until they can get to that point.
That requires everybody on the team to be on the same page, and everybody has to be perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting.
Thanks for this dialogue. This is
this is
really cool. Well, I've never got to sit
fascinating.
next to a fighter jet pilot before and have this
Yeah.
conversation. So, and there really are call signs. Rooster out there. It's not
Yeah.
just Top Gun 2.
Yeah. Well,
That's crazy.
It's true.
let's
Let's get into Zach's story.
let's talk about December 27th, 2020.
Well, as you know, I'm a father who is surviving unspeakable tragedy about losing a child. And it doesn't really matter how any parent loses a child. It's a tragedy no one should experience. But we live in a world where it happens for various reasons. Before I address what happened, I kind of like to share a little bit about who Zach was.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Please.
how he lived. So this is my guy, Zach. Zach is the youngest of three amazing guys. He was a senior at Whitney High School in Rockland, and he was very successful academically, athletically, extracurricular, community service. He was truly gifted. He was very smart. Got A's in every class. He got the highest marks in the end of the year AP exam for all his AP classes. His junior year, as he started his junior year, so he's barely halfway through high school, he scored a 1550 on the SAT out of 1,600. I think that's either 3 or 4 missed questions.
He scored a what?
1550 out of 1,600.
Almost a perfect score.
Right.
Wow.
But he's halfway through high school. He hasn't even started his junior year or his senior year. He read a lot as a kid, and clearly, I took that damn SAT test at least a dozen times. I got nowhere near that score.
Me neither.
So he got his looks and brains from mom, clearly, like all my kids. But he was very successful in class, and all his teachers thought the world of him and said, I've had teachers say, I wish all my students could be like that. He's very respectful. He's very attentive. He loves to help. He was on a rec soccer team here in Rockland. It was called the Falcons. This is our soccer team. And he did that for 6 years, all the way till his senior year in high school. And I witnessed many times after practice, he would do speed drills for his friends on a track team and to best his own time after soccer practice. I coached him soccer for 6 years. And then on the track field, he had really learned to love that sport because you might be really fast, you might be really strong, so you're good with, the relays or the track events. You might be good with the shot put or the discus. It's kind of a sport where everyone can find where their talents are and be part of a team. And we really like that. But he loved hurdling, and he did the high jump. His sophomore year had a unique story about how he was so very successful. He started as a junior, a junior varsity in hurdling, but then advanced to varsity pretty quick. And it reminded me of the Louis Zamperini story that's showcased in Laura Hildebrand's book, Unbroken, where this was a famous track athlete during the 30s who ended up being an alternate in the 1936 Olympics. And what got him there is that every time he had a track meet, he bested his own time or got a PR, personal record. And like Louis Zamperini, Zach was doing the same thing with his track meets, and people took notice. And it ended up that at the end of that season, Zach was the only student in his high school of 2,000 students to make it to the San Joaquin CIF sectionals in his event. And that story is pretty beautiful. It's beautiful. It's pretty incredible when he was getting ready to run his heat and how he felt and what we talked about just before his race. And yes, he got another PR that day. So it was a really cool story. His junior year, he stepped outside his comfort zone and auditioned for his school musical production called High School Musical. So I don't know if you saw the movie with Zac Efron like 10 or 20 years ago. Zach auditioned for that, and it was his first play, and he actually landed the lead role of it. And there's several side stories about his concerns about, oh man, my track mates or my soccer mates are going to make fun of me. I'm in a musical. Crap. And I don't know if I should do this. And I said, that's the plot of the movie, Zach. And then, they gave me a call back, but I'm going to do it so my girlfriend I'm there to support her. She's auditioning. And I'm like, that's also the plot of the movie, Zach. And so it's comical how this is all working out. And he got the part, and he was screaming and hooting and hollering and couldn't believe it. And it was just a bright, successful part of him. I think of all these successes that he's had, the attributes that I really treasure is his propensity to help his friends. He really wanted to help people be better at their game, whatever it is. If they're struggling academically or athletically or community service. As I mentioned, he was doing that. He was very active in scouting. He was nearing completion of the rank of Eagle. He was roughly halfway done with his Eagle project, and he wanted to finish before he turned 18. And he was on track, but he died prior to being able to finish. And he loved mentoring. He loved helping. And I really treasure that, because you could be very smart and get A's, or just barely get along, get your C minuses, but that doesn't define you. Your heart does. And he had love in his heart. He cared, and he wanted to help. And I love that. And I think after tragedy happened, he could continue to help others with his story. So I believe in, continuing the legacy on that. So what happened? Zach was, like so many young kids, going through the lockdowns of COVID, and wasn't able to go to school. At the end of his junior year, they canceled they canceled the track season. He had a school trip scheduled to go to France with his French class, canceled. 2 days before his behind-the-wheel test, canceled. Junior prom, canceled. All our other summer plans, canceled. Homecoming in the fall, canceled. And we were able to get soccer practice. It took a lot of trickery and cajoling to have the league to allow us to practice. But one by one, every week, our games were canceled. And it was really depressing and frustrating, and everyone struggled their own unique way with that. But in December of 2020, our mall was starting to open up, and it was one of our first public gathering places here in our area. So Roseville, called the Galleria Mall. And once that opened up, it was very exciting for Zach and his buddies. Because I coached his team for so long, I knew his buddies very well. I knew their parents. We vacationed together all over Tahoe to Hawaii to Jamaica as a soccer team. So we're really tight as a community. And all of the boys were like, we finally are actually going to be able to hang out and live life like we thought we would live as high school seniors and not be locked down. And Zach made a point, we're going to get our diplomas, and, this isn't how we should be as seniors. While we can, let's get out there. And I later learned that the mall was full of middle school and high school kids, but pretty much only middle school and high school kids. Well, back in December of 2020, when we're all so distracted and focused on COVID and slowly opening up public gathering places, the thought never occurred to me that also at the mall are young people, young being in their 20s, who are there peddling poison for profit. They were selling products that had something in it that could kill. And many of these dealers or people didn't really understand or know the full enormity of how dangerous this product was, because they weren't fully aware. And that doesn't, I think, excuse if it's a crime, it's a crime, and you shouldn't be doing it. But that's essentially what happened. Zach was at our mall with his buddies. Most of them were soccer classmates, and they somehow made contact with this person through Snapchat. And what I learned from our investigation is that this dealer exploited certain features on Snapchat. specifically the quick add feature, the geotagging feature, and the Snap Score feature to advertise and to locate other Snapchat users in the mall and approach them and say, hey, did you see my ad? What do you think of this and that? I eventually later saw that ad, and I was astonished what he was advertising openly on Snapchat. And they ended up having a conversation that lasted about 2 minutes, maybe 3. Eventually, it was caught on surveillance camera video at the mall that investigators later were able to positively identify the exchange. And as far as what was said, we really don't know other than what we heard from Zach's friends. But they talked about a Percocet pill. And why Zach and his friends would want a Percocet, I really don't know the truth to that. At that point, we believe, Zach's mom and I believed that Zach had no struggle with any kind of addiction. Does that mean he wasn't using recreationally? No, there's no guarantees. And I later learned that he and his soccer buddies had tried vapes 6 months prior. I have no doubt they may have tried other types of marijuana or edibles, but I never saw it in my house. I never saw it in Zach's possession. Of course, I had every conversation I knew to have about marijuana, about vapes, about edibles, about safe sex, about drunk driving, about pornography, or all the things I knew to talk about. But at the time, I never knew anything about a fake pill because that wasn't advertised. That there was no discussion anywhere about fake pills. And I also didn't realize that social media is a proverbial grocery store to buy anything you can imagine, anything, guns, drugs, anything, people, and it's openly advertised. I was shocked to see how openly advertised it is, and they don't check ID, and they usually advertise to people who are under 21 because they can't go legally into a dispensary or a liquor store or whatnot. So my guess is Zach and his friends thought this could be a safe high, or part of the conversation one of the soccer players said is that they were thinking that they could get a better workout. When the dealer, whose name is Virgil, said, hey, this is a Percocet like you can get from your dentist, like if you have oral surgery. Percocet is over here on the spectrum of how strong it is. Fentanyl is beyond the scope. And whether you talk about Percocet or Adderall or oxycodone or OxyContin or codone or morphine or fentanyl or Dilaudid, most people don't really know, well, how do they all relate? But Percocet is a very common prescription from a doctor for mild to moderate pain. One thought is as an alternative to creatine, if you take Percocet, you kind of get numbed with any pain receptors, then you can do more reps, more push-ups, more pull-ups. During COVID, my garage, apparently I got it wrong. It's not meant to be used to house a car. Instead, it's meant to be used for your high school son and his soccer teams to make it a workout. And slowly, when I come home from Lowe's run and whatnot, all stuff was out. I'm like, what are you doing? Hey, we got to work out in an hour, Dad. You can't park here. and that during COVID, it's like, well, I guess that's not for my car. I have an SUV. So I think they were big workout guys. They would work out doing pull-ups with big heavy chains and stuff. And Zach asked me, is it okay to take more than 2 Motrin after a workout or before a workout? I'm like, well, why would you take Motrin? And he said, well, when I do these pull-ups, he did a lot of them. He would wear these chains. I said, buddy, maybe you shouldn't wear those chains while you're doing pull-ups. It won't hurt your neck so much. Just do more reps. And I can, to a degree, believe maybe they thought, you know what, if we can take this, then we can get a good workout and we won't feel the pain or, stress of, muscle stress of working out. Obviously, I think that's all within the realm of experimenting. I believe Zach, like so many other young people, was in the normal range of what high school kids do. Zach never was diagnosed with depression or anxiety. And I think he just didn't really understand that, hey, the game has changed. No one's cared to tell us the rules have changed. There's a new product in town that's very, very lethal. I don't think he would have tried to experiment there.
Probably not. If the education was out there, at least.
Yeah, it just was non-existent at the time.
Yeah. So, sounds like an all-around great kid, and thank you for sharing a small bit of who Zach was. I was like visualizing what he would have been like, or what he was like in high school, and an athlete, and a son, and a brother. So, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So he purchases this. Was it just one Percocet pill at the mall?
I don't know.
Okay.
And I don't know how that exchange started. Snapchat is ephemeral, as you know, meaning once a message is sent, it disappears. So we only know based on what Virgil didn't share, which was virtually nothing, and what Zach's buddies were. But when you're 14 and 15 years old, or 16 years old, and the star of the play, the Eagle Scout kid, the one kid who got the coach's award in track and soccer, you look up to this kid who's super successful, and he dies from some way. You really freak out as a 15-year-old, and it's hard to have full disclosure because they're afraid. So I would assume Zach wasn't the only one who bought pills. It was him and friends. I don't know how many, if it's just one friend or others. I know at least one other. And if they only bought one or many, I think they bought one and then had another exchange and bought a second one. But again, I don't know those details yet.
Okay, so December 27th is when you end up coming home and finding Zach in his bedroom. Kind of walk us through that.
Sure.
How many days after was it when he bought that pill? You came home. Where were you? And just kind of how that all played out.
Here's how I like to explain it, and I could be, missing some key elements. Again, I don't know because a lot of it was just word of mouth or on Snapchat, which disappears messages. But after Christmas, Zach wanted to hang out with his buddies on Saturday, December 26th, which is not atypical. Kids who are with family for Christmas and want to be with their friends after Christmas.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, show off everything you got, hang out with your buddies.
Yeah.
Yes, you're done with your family. Yes.
And he also had a really tight relationship with a girl, his girlfriend named Sydney. And they were at the mall. Sydney was not, but Zach was with his friends on Saturday. He had plans to have dinner with Sydney and her family. Solid family. I mountain bike every now and then with her dad. Great family, great influence. I 100% trusting of their family and their environment. They loved and admired Zach, and Zach and Sydney were tight, and he wanted to be with her. He was new to driving because he had just gotten, they had to reschedule, I think 5 months after they canceled his driving test because of COVID. He finally got his license. It was late, but COVID impacted that. So he's a new teenager in the family with a license. And I, as a father, I'm worried. He always demonstrated good judgment and responsibility as a kid, and definitely as a driver, because he didn't want to mess it up. And he came home before curfew. He asked, "Can we do a Christmas movie?" And I was relieved. He got home. I was a new driver. I'm like, "Where are you?
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing now? What's the game plan?" And I had rules, and he respected them, and it was great. And he got home. I've never seen him come home drunk. Never seen him come home high. I've never seen him come home somehow in any way impaired. And I've done some random checks in his room as he was going through high school. I used to monitor his phone. I used to track him. But after his freshman year or towards the beginning of his sophomore year, who's doing so well, like at some point I can't just helicopter over this kid. I got to show that he's earning, independence and freedom. But as a new driver, I was clampering down again. And once he got home, I was relieved, never realizing that in his possession was imminent danger. And because I hadn't heard of this fake pill thing. But we watched a Christmas movie, and it was great. It was Zach, his older siblings, and me, and our dogs. And after the movie, it was time to go to bed, and his last words to me is, "I love you, Dad." Never thought anything other than that. He always said, "I love you." He always initiated it, almost always. And if I initiated the "I love you" when we go to bed at night, he always responded, "I love you, Dad," which is a beautiful thing, I think, for any parent to have with their child. And Sunday, December 27th rolls around. Kids wake up late during their Christmas breaks and summer breaks, which is pretty standard. But after lunchtime, Zach hadn't emerged. And he's usually the last one to wake up because he likes to stay up all night playing Minecraft with his soccer mates. He did that a lot during COVID to socialize. But I went to check on him, and I went in his room, and I saw him appearing to be asleep at his desk. And he had his head resting on his left arm like that, as if he fell asleep. He's in his PJs. And I thought, "Oh, dude, you're up all night again?" And I went to approach him, and I got within 2 feet, and I sensed a void I've never really experienced before. I knew something was horribly wrong, and I could tell he wasn't breathing. In my 25-year involvement in the military, we regularly learn CPR, self-aid buddy care, and we have to go through that training all the time. And I didn't even think, it just snapped, and I started CPR. While I was doing that, I alerted my other son, Sam, who was a senior at UC Davis, to call 911, and told him something's wrong with Zach. And he brought the phone into Zach's room. He came upstairs to give me the phone, and I won't ever forget the shock on his face to see a lifeless younger brother and dad giving CPR. And he kind of panicked, and he was paralyzed. And I had to kind of try to control the situation and not lose my shit. So I asked Sam, "You need to go downstairs, tell your sister, Allie, you guys need to let the first responders in and control the dogs. And we got this." So I gave him a mission, and he did that. And MedTechs got there pretty fast. We lived in Whitney Ranch area. There was a fire station on Whitney Wildcat Drive. They were there quick. I want to say around 7 first responders, to include MedTechs, firemen, and 1 Rockland PD guy showed up, all about the same time. They all went straight to Zach's room, and they took over. And the Rockland PD turned me around, so he's having me face him and not Zach, and ask the obvious questions. And they had their equipment, and they were putting sensors on him, and they were thinking, do we start a defib or what's going on? And they tried. I never really imagined, honestly, in my years of training, that I would give CPR to a soldier in a battlefield, yet alone to my son in his bedroom. But that's what happened. And as horrifically tragic it is to lose brothers and sisters on a deployment doing the job, far from family, friends, and comfort in a remote area of Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else, when it's in your child's bedroom in your home, it's like, what's going on here? To me, this is a whole new level. When we go and do our job as a first responder, police, sheriff, fire, military. We're trained, we're equipped, we're with our comrades to go and do a job. Now, oftentimes that job's risky, but Zach didn't have training. He didn't know about the dangers of fentanyl or fake pill or how predators work or groom on social media, and neither did I. He was alone. He was untrained, unequipped, alone. And I have a serious problem with that. And that's why I think this is another level I never really thought about before. But in any case, we tried. I think it was around a half hour. Of course, the world's coming apart, so I lost temporal awareness about how much time. But they said, "Sorry, it's too late," and they stood up. And my first reaction was, "No fucking way, absolutely not." I grew up with the mindset and the generation of failure is not an option. I will not accept that. And I said, "Help me save my boy." And they just stood there, and they were really sad and started crying. They knew that there was nothing. It was too late. So, being the aggressive, spirited person I can be, sometimes I said, "Well, fuck this," and I directed them. I said to that fireman, "You call 911," and I told him, "Give me that defib," and I started going for the defib. And they were like, "Whoa!" And they said, "No." And I said, "Where's the EpiPens?" And I grabbed into the bag and grabbed the EpiPens, and they pulled me aside. And I said, "I told you to call 911, motherfucker, and then give me your phone." And I was just being directive, trying to take over because they weren't able to. And I think I started CPR again, and it was just too late. And someone, maybe the police, I don't know, someone, pulled me away. And that's really like a physical, not just what you hear, but the touch of someone gently pulling me away was confirmation that I absolutely have no chance. There's zero chance, and I need to stop. And then I fell over in a fetal position and lost it. And that moment was clearly the worst moment of my life. I was destroyed. I am broken because of that. Because, when you lose a child and you witness it, it's truly at the top of any parent's grief hierarchy. But when it's from a danger you've never heard of before, it really adds a lot of confusion and disorientation there. What the hell's going on? How does a healthy 17-year-old, I'm getting a phone call. How does a healthy 17-year-old high school senior just no longer be breathing in the privacy of his own room? So obviously they have to figure out what happened. More first responders showed, eventually sheriff showed. All that happened pretty quick, and then they called in the coroners. I think at one point I had around 25 agents in my house. They asked me to leave Zach's room, and around 7 or 8 of them examined Zach's body in his room for about 2.5 hours. They know every single hiding spot. They're very savvy. They're very skilled. And then eventually, Zach's mom, she showed up about 30 minutes later, and we broke the news to her. And the coroner asked, "Hey, did Zach have any health issues or drug history?" And I said no to both. I don't know if he's ever tried any kind of drug, but we don't have any experience here. And they said, "Has he been diagnosed with anxiety, depression?" I said, "No, he's super successful." And they said, "Well, this is a mystery because usually no matter what the kid, we always find a vape or something, but there was nothing in Zach's room. It's clean. We know all the hiding spots, no drugs, no paraphernalia, no residue, no clues of any kind of drug activity at all. His body was clean, no needle markings or any of that stuff." So at that night, honestly, guys, we thought he may have died from an undisclosed health issue, which actually just happened to one of my Air Force friends a few years prior to his 17-year-old daughter. who was a cross country athlete. And I thought, oh my gosh, this happened to us now. And so obviously it's traumatic, but we were really in the dark. What really happened? However, we started putting the puzzle together, and it really bugged me. Why were you talking about a drug-related? Why would, possible, but I doubt it. So we're just trying to figure out what happened. And as the weeks came along, we were starting to put the puzzle together. And after, I think about a week or two, it started to make me think, wait a minute, there may be a drug story here. Unfortunately, lightning does strike twice. About a week after Zach died, my mother unexpectedly died. She lives in Sacramento. And she just received a very clean bill of health from her doctor. But when we had to share the news, and family came in all over on both mom and dad's side, me and Zach's mom's family, I think it was just too heavy on her heart. She saw her other grandchildren suffering. She lost her grandson, Zach, and saw how it was hurting me. And I think it was too heavy on her heart. And she was 84, and she had a massive heart attack, and it was unexpected. So I was reeling with that. That happened.
Wow.
That happened 3 days before Zach's funeral. So really just kind of dealing with a lot at that point. So I just had to kind of put my nose to the grindstone. How do I survive this? How do I manage these tragedies? And that was not easy. How to survive that, how to get past that was, I wasn't trained for that. I never really knew anyone who had to go through something like that. And I kind of felt like I was having to reinvent the wheel.
So when do you guys start to kind of figure out that Zach had potentially purchased this pill? Was it the toxicology report that came back and they informed you guys that there was a lethal dosage of fentanyl in his body? And then is that how that unfolded? And then what was the thought process after that?
The toxicology report took about 2 months. We knew before that there was a drug-related story here. Our first break was from Zach's girlfriend. And then Zach's buddies were sharing some information. And when I learned that the guys that were with Zach at the mall, I went to talk to them. And I had our investigators asked to talk to them. And they shared the story I already explained about the Galleria Mall. Zach's girlfriend, and they talked every day. And oftentimes they would video Skype every night or FaceTime as they go to bed. And I knew that Sydney was going to expect to speak to Zach Saturday night. Mm-hmm. And so I had to call her mom and dad, share the horrific news. And they couldn't believe it. She called me, Sydney, directly, immediately after, and she demanded to speak to Zach. And I didn't know what to say other than the truth. And she wailed. She insisted to come visit Monday, the 28th. She wanted to see for herself. She would visit and spend time with Zach at my house and vice versa. And when they were at my house, they wanted to watch movies in his room. They really contributed to their relationship in a beautiful way. It was pretty impressive. I was envious. I thought this is great. You're in love, and you're there's reciprocity with compassion and authentic, genuine love for each other. It was really nice, and it was nice to see. But the door must stay open.
Yeah,
you are not allowed to shut this door.
All right, good work, good work.
So, and they were very respectful, and that's another side story. But when she came to the house, of course, we embraced each other, and she insisted to be in his room, and she crawled in his bed for 4.5 hours because she felt she could be closer to him that way, because she could smell him, she can feel his presence there. And as a dad, it's gut wrenching when you see a 16-year-old girl suffer. And, you know, I think when you witness a young loved one, a child or a boyfriend or girlfriend of someone of your child that knows, they love them, and they are suffering, and you can't do anything to stop that. You can't do anything to take it away or to minimize it. There's nothing you can do. That has a layer of like PTSD to the problem. And I didn't know what to do. But in any case, I checked on her every half hour or so and asked, do you know what's going on? Like, what happened? Because they asked if he had a drug story, but did he ever complain of like his chest hurting, or was he short of breath? Or I'm trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I have no idea, but I know his passcode. That was our big break, to know his passcode to his cell phone. And when Rockland PD was at the house the day before, they asked you, does he have a phone? Well, it's right on his desk. And they asked, do you know the code? And I said, no. And he said, well, if you find out, call us, and we want to look at the phone, which makes sense. As soon as we got the passcode, I called. I said, okay, put it in airplane mode, plug it in, turn it off, don't touch it. And Rockland PD looked at it, and then the DA, Placer County DA, has a task force that specializes on narcotics type of stories, so they wanted to connect that way. Because Rockland PD have limited experience and technology to kind of really know where and what to look at. And their initial view was like, well, we don't see any smoking gun right now, but wouldn't surprise if there's more. We're going to hand this to an investigator. But they gave me the phone back, and we weren't sure when this investigator was going to be able to come by. So it took about an extra 2 days, and it was a crazy story. What happened? As you can imagine, when you lose a high school child in your house, my house was always full of people. It was Grand Central Station. I had my family, Zach's mom's family, all our neighbors' family of our track team, our scout troop, our soccer team, the cast team. Neighbors, friends of friends were constantly coming by to give sympathy. And our house was a florist shop. I had enough food to feed the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, the people were just bringing stuff.
Yeah.
People I didn't know would bring like flowers or plants, bags, just stuff. And it got a little bit insane as far as
overwhelming.
A little bit. But my head's in the clouds. I'm just kind of a zombie trying to figure which way is up. Well, here comes some guy who was wearing ripped up jeans and Converse shoes and a pinstripe shirt that is a Budweiser truck driver shirt.
Awesome.
Typical narc guy.
Cap. He had a big mullet and a beard bigger than yours. It was massive. And he was empty-handed. He was walking towards the front door, and I thought, what the hell? Who is this guy? He looked shady. And no offense, dude, you don't look shady, but this guy,
I hear you.
He had a mat. You would have respected. You could probably have 2 or 3 birds' nests in his beard. And he walked up. I decided to go outside. I didn't want him to come in the house because I didn't know who he was. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like to protect the family and the visitors, I need to be outside. And I said, can I help you? And his name, he had a patch on it, said Hank is his name, where the Budweiser truck driving part was embroidered. And he said, yeah, I'm here to see Chris Didier. I said, I'm Chris. How can I help you? I said, I'm Chris. How can I help you, Hank? And he said, oh, sorry. My name's not Hank. I'm Patrick. And I'm with the task force with Placer County, and I'm here. I understand you have a cell phone. I thought, oh, geez, dude, you just startled me because I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
recognize. I wasn't expecting you to show up this way. He goes,
Just all handsome.
he said, I'm undercover. I just got off a shift and I want to come straight here. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I probably should have told you, hey, I'll be wearing a Budweiser truck driver. It's one of his many,
Identity.
disguises and stuff. It was very well played. I said, let me get the phone. And he turns on the phone. He first goes to Snapchat. Took 90 seconds to find the dealer. And he showed me the dealer's profile. It was a video and what the video showed. And I'm standing there in shock. Who the F is this guy? He's like, well, I think he's the dealer. Have you heard of this guy? Do you know him? I said, nope. And I'm shocked that Zach would even know him. And he said, well, thing is, quick ad feature, these dealers get to know all the kids. Do you know what quick ad feature is on Snapchat?
I don't have Snapchat, but we use it at work as an investigative way to find people. I can say that.
So for viewers who may not know, if I text you a message and you respond back, if you respond back to me, if I was the dealer, then I get to know all of your contacts on your cell phone with that one exchange.
What?
Snapchat
Exactly.
is wild.
That's,
so
that's the quick ad feature.
if I downloaded Snapchat on my phone and you had it on your phone and you sent me a message and I sent one back, you would know every contact on my phone?
All of your Snapchat contacts.
Oh, Snapchat.
Yeah, your
Still.
Snapchat, and you have to have that feature on there. Yeah,
That's
It's defaulted on.
Oh,
and
my God.
99% of how high school kids communicate isn't via text, it's via Snapchat. And their contact lists are way longer on Snapchat than their regular cell phone contact lists like mine, like yours and mine. So when one high school kid gets in contact with a dealer, then that dealer knows all the contacts that one high school kid has, which could include Zach, could include your kids or anybody.
Yeah.
And now they're like, hey, I'm going to start targeting certain possible
customers.
Customers. Predation is what's going on here. So when he showed me this, I'm like asking, how the hell did he get in contact with Zach? He said, there's many ways, but probably the quick ad feature is how they made contact. It happens. I think most of the cases it's like that. And as he was explaining, here comes a message from the dealer. And Patrick said, I've got a live fish. This guy just reached out to Zach. I really want to take this phone. Can I have it? Because I absolutely need to go after this guy. And I said, you go get him. And he kept the phone. And they set up a sting operation. I can't really tell the details of how they conducted the sting operation, but I'm sure you get an idea. They basically set up another exchange, and then they made certain decisions on how to track him, follow him, and eventually they made an arrest. They learned a lot about him. What they told me was that in October of 2020, he was sentenced to 5 years probation for other drug and weapons crimes in Sacramento County, our neighboring county. And instead of serving jail, they just gave him 5 years probation. 2 months later, he meets up with Zach and his friends at the mall, does an exchange. And I'm sure that he made other exchanges with other young people wherever. Eventually, once they got into Zach's phone, did their sting operation, they made the arrest about a month after Zach died. And the guy was confused why he got arrested until they finally asked about Zach. And then he realized, the kid died. He stopped talking. He wanted to talk to an attorney, didn't want to share any more information. He wasn't playing along. So he insisted on his phone call. He called his dad, who has a long history, an arrest history himself, from what I was told. And he told his parents, hey, I need you to post bail, but before you do that, I need you to go to these websites. Here's my login credentials, and I need you to delete these accounts right now, which was clearly...
Which was done on a jail cell phone call.
I don't know if it was on a cell phone, but yeah, from a
jail call, I meant, yeah.
Yes.
Which are recorded.
Always.
Yeah.
And apparently, being 21, he probably didn't know that or wasn't sure.
It says when you make a phone call from the jail that this line is being recorded, and you wouldn't believe some of the things that people say, but
I've heard. So naturally, the investigating team sent out preservation letters immediately, and that was part of their continuing investigation. He posted bail about 4 or 5 hours after he was booked and arrested, so he's out on the street that night. Because he violated parole in Sac County by committing these crimes here in Placer County, that generated an arrest warrant because he was violating parole, he was violating probation.
Yeah.
It took about 3 weeks, so they caught up with him. They made it their next arrest. At the time, what I understand, he resisted being detained. He, in his possession, had 2 firearms. One of them had the serial number shaved off. He was a known gang member. He's a legal alien. He had a number of different controlled substances with him and 40 Xanax bars. And they arrested him because of the violation of his probation. And then we started our court hearings with multiple arraignment hearings, and then our county district attorney, Morgan Geyer, the prosecuting attorney is named Dan, and they were a dream team. They absolutely are professional, extremely thorough. Dan is the most methodical and thorough attorney I've ever met. He wants to stay in control of the situation. They initially decided to file charges of involuntary manslaughter and a number of different, I think 3 other drug-related controlled substance charges. I asked, why are we only doing that? He sold something to my son. He took one of them and he died. I think that's murder. And they said, we haven't done that here, and our state hasn't really done that, although Riverside County was just starting to get popular with that. And Morgan was thinking we should elevate this to the federal and go to the attorney's office, U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
3 times we tried, and 3 times they said, no, we're not going to take it. We want to go for bigger fish, and we were limited on resources. I tried myself to talk to the Eastern District U.S. attorney himself more than once. I have a family member who is a U.S. attorney on the civil side and knew guys there on the criminal side and tried to cash in chips, and they repeatedly said, no, this is a kind of a nickel and dime thing. And I asked him, how is it a nickel and dime thing if what they're doing is killing people? Nickel and dime is selling a controlled substance, but not a non-lethal amount, in my mind. But when it's lethal, how big of a gun do you need? If it kills someone, it kills someone. And it was just a perspective that was different back then. Now it's evolved and
a lot.
Yeah, not law enforcement, but prosecuting attorneys are thinking things very differently because of that.
So was this the first case did it go to trial or did he plea?
He did plea, and this was Placer County's first fentanyl-related death investigation they were charging. There were others. There's a cold case of a young man named Spencer who died from a fake pill, who died about 3 or 4 months before Zach did, and they just opened it up because they were able to break in his phone after being on a machine for over a year.
Yeah, let me touch on that real quick because some people might be confused about that and think that it's probably easier to get into a phone than it actually is. And today's phones, and especially an Apple product, not to pinpoint, but makes it incredibly difficult to get into your phone if you have some type of password. And there are updates that come out. Recently, Apple just put out an update, which we're working through right now in the law enforcement world, and that's if your phone stays stagnant for 72 hours, completely wipes itself and does like a factory hard reset. So after 72 hours, if you don't touch your phone, it's wiped clean, done. And Apple has put that update out as of recently, a few months ago. And so there's always these updates that are coming out. And I don't want to sit here and say, I don't know that Apple's making it difficult for law enforcement purposely whatever their motive is. But when you ask for their assistance to help get into a phone, that assistance isn't there. And so, and then they do make it more challenging. They put up more walls to get into people's phones. And I understand the privacy part of it, but you take a case like this, it shouldn't be that difficult, or this other kid, Spencer, to get into his phone just because he has a passcode on it. And it's incredibly difficult. And I'm not going to get into detail about some of the technology that we have to crack phones. But it's ever evolving. We're always trying to play catch up. I don't think we're ever ahead in the game, because in the tech world, they're always ahead, and they're always putting out these updates on cell phones. So just to hit on that kind of high level, the cell phone thing is incredibly tricky. It seems like I should be able to take your phone, plug it into a machine, and have it dump your phone, and I get all the information. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. The good news is if we can get into a phone, which we will get into the phone. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes we need to wait for a newer update of this device that we'll use to get into your phone to even be able to crack it. But when we do get into it, people are under the impression you can go on your phone, delete things, and it's gone, and it's not. More oftentimes than not. And I'm not a cell phone forensic expert by any means. I'm not trying to sound like I am. Usually we can extract that information, but the cell phone thing is where we are with technology. It's incredibly challenging. So I understand that part of it, but so when you say it sat on a machine for a year, I believe that. Yeah. It just depends on what kind of phone you have, what kind of updates, because sometimes Apple will put out suggest an update on your phone, and you can either choose to deny it or accept it and then update your phone. And if you update your phone, it now makes it more challenging. And like I said, they have this new 72-hour thing where it's like, if you don't touch your phone for 72 hours, it wipes itself.
Yeah, I never heard of that.
So imagine if let's say we're investigating something, we take your phone and we go put it in a, storage locker or something, and it can't get hooked to a device for a few days because maybe, investigators are busy, holiday weekend, whatever. Or you have to get a warrant to even get into the phone. Now you have 3 days to do that. Do you see the workaround here, like how challenging that could be? Because if you let it sit for 3 days without touching it, meaning getting into it, it's gone.
It makes it worse.
So how do you do that? Anyways.
Why do you guys think that Apple, Google, Samsung are so resistant to helping law enforcement or investigators?
I don't think they're resistive of helping law enforcement.
I think
they're about privacy to maintain, and I'm not defending one, because I truly believe that during an investigation you should just be able to access that stuff if you can articulate why. But
if you even get a warrant. If you have a warrant,
absolutely.
I say I have a warrant, you still say sorry.
Well, yeah, that
happens.
But I think
that happens all the time.
I think they're about privacy across the board. And my thought would be, you're talking about privacy, and if they bend that, or in their eyes they're bending that and providing access to different things, that jeopardizes their integrity of what privacy is. And I think that's why they're completely resistant. But you could also go into a ton of different politics, which we don't express here on our platform, but there's a lot of different things. But I think it's focused around privacy.
I 100% agree. I think what they're trying to do is advertise to potential customers or existing customers. Look, ours is a lockbox that no one, even law enforcement or investigators, will ever get into.
Yeah.
So you can trust our product. It gives you complete privacy. It's secure, and sells these products advertising that. But I got a question. Do we have privacy in our own homes, apartments, or cars?
No, and I don't think we do.
Especially if you have cameras, you don't.
Well, no, not only that. People are openly forgoing and signing away their privacy by the TVs, these Alexas in your home. They're constantly recording, and you're saying that they can have it. In fact, I just purchased a TV, and I was just going to click through, and you have to accept all these different things on it. And my wife she's like, no, I want to see what's on here. And she was reading them, and deep down through it, like far enough where I was like, I just want to see the TV. It literally said that you were, by unclicking this, you would have to unclick it. that the TV would remain, the camera would remain on, and they would record your audio continuously. So if she didn't read that and unclick it, our TV would be recording audio and video out of a video camera.
There's
Yeah,
a
that's
video
weird.
camera on your TV?
I had no idea, but yes. So
Wow.
So yes, people are giving away their freedoms of privacy just in their
Right.
People are slowly taking it.
Well, where I was going with that is if a crime has been committed and law enforcement or investigators have reasonable suspicion that, hey, there's evidence in that residence or there's evidence in that car, they call for a search warrant, and now they can lawfully go in that residence or in that car and search solely for the purpose of their investigation. That's the real world. Why can't we do that in the cyber world?
Well, I think that happens in the judges author that.
I just talked to Judge Penny, who was on the panel, or he was a presiding judge in the case of Virgil Bordner, who was the dealer for Zach and his friends. And I asked him that. This was Tuesday night. Do you guys do search warrants for cellular devices? He said, yeah.
All the time.
And I asked, have they ever worked? He said, honestly, I don't know. If you ask Patrick or any of the investigators who actually do those forensics, they will tell you 10 times out of 10, they do not get access. They're not complying with a court order.
Right.
And when a court tries to prosecute, well, their deep pockets pays off bigger attorneys,
Yeah.
and those never go to case. So that's the reality of it, is these cell phone makers are basically using their high dollar attorneys to not get in legal trouble because they're not complying with a court order to allow access to the phone. And they come up with different talking points and excuses as to why they can't, but all of it I call bullshit. Encryption. These are encrypted phones, and it's the double helix, super gyrating, three-dimensional encryption program. No one can break into it. Okay, how does a 13-year-old girl with a hand-me-down iPhone with an outdated OS can encrypt these messages? I don't get it. If she can do that, why can't law enforcement have the code?
They can. And sometimes, especially with a child, the P word, well, I'm not going to say it. We'll get it blocked. But that is a common problem for those investigators. They'll have to email Google or whoever sometimes and say, hey, you're not complying with this court order. Like, do we need to take this another step? And then sometimes they'll comply, but you have to almost threaten them for them to give it back to you. We actually did an episode on that with somebody I work with who does all that stuff. But anyways, so full circle, he takes his plea for manslaughter.
The reason why, I'm glad you brought us back around that. Originally, he pled not guilty. And if we go to trial with involuntary manslaughter, and best case scenario, after factoring in halftime and all that, he was going to be facing anywhere between 2.5 to 5 years, probably 3 years of jail time or prison time. And I thought, that's insulting.
Yeah.
He's knowingly doing something wrong. He was already sentenced to 5 years probation, still went out and did it, and then still was doing it after learning that he killed someone. This guy needs more than 3 years. Personally, if he's a legal alien, I think he should be kicked out of the country. You're not being a citizen in good standing. If you're going to break crimes and cause murder or death, you shouldn't be in this country if you're not a citizen, which I know opens a lot of other doors, and I don't mean to cause any strife there, but we're talking about a dead child who had more than demonstrated the potential to bring new innovation and progress in the world, who was destined to do great things and to continue helping others. And so we can't ignore that. I think that when he first thought, I'm going to try to fight it, another fentanyl-related case happened. A young man named Cade Webb died about not quite a year, but almost a year after Zach died. So while we're going through arraignments through the spring and the summer and the fall, and continuances and getting ready for pretrial and all of that, Cade Webb dies. They arrest that dealer. Cade Webb is the cousin of the San Francisco Giants pitcher Logan Webb. Logan was the first family member on the scene. Logan Webb was supposed to be married 2 days later, and Cade was getting a haircut to be ready for the wedding. So it absolutely put a huge black cloud over the family wedding event that they had planned. Cade was just a young high school kid who was just going through his struggles in life and was sold a fake pill. And the dealer took him into a Safeway restaurant or a restroom, and the dealer walked out. And then about 45 minutes later or an hour later, an employee went in the restroom and then called 911, and it was too late. What they had learned on the investigation of what happened to Zach and what the investigating team was learning, they were quickly able to get a lot of concrete information that was absolutely embolden the district attorney's position that we're going to charge murder on this new case. And then they called Zach's mom and I in and said, you know what, we're learning a lot with what happened to Zach and how they communicated, how he exploited social media, his true intent. We're going to now add murder to Virgil Bordner's case, which was very significant to us. Yeah. This isn't just involuntary manslaughter. When Virgil Bordner's defense attorney heard that, Morgan just gave notice. Hey, this is our newest case, and based on what we learned with Virgil and his activities and with this other dealer's activities, we're changing things. We're going for murder now, just letting you know. And that's when the defense side returned saying, we're going to change our plea. We want to offer a plea. If you don't add murder charge, we'll plea to agree to the current charges at their maximum levels. And that's what we ended up doing.
Mm. And what is that? What was the max charge? Like, what is he sentenced to?
Great question. There were many different charges. GBI, great bodily injury, was one of them. Several narcotics ones, and of course, involuntary manslaughter. So they each have a certain section, and it's not concurrent, so they stack up. And when you add it all up, it was 17 years. And it took me a day till it slapped me in the face. That's how old Zach was.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Damn.
So he's currently serving out his sentence. Where at?
I think it's in Kern County at state prison there.
Have you spoke to this
No.
man? Have you never?
No, he hasn't reached out to me. When we had the sentencing hearing, it was September 1st, 2022. Of course, we made family impact statements, my kids, Zach's mom, me. We had so many people supporting us from our community. They had a rather large overflow room because the courtroom was too full. Media was there, and we had a press conference afterwards. And the defendant made comments also, and it was very... He was very apologetic, wish he didn't do it. He should have known better. He was lost, and he wants to look for atonement, that he knows that there's nothing he could ever do to bring back Zach. Pretty, I would think, typical of what you would hope someone would say versus nothing. But that's his thing. We did file restitution where whatever he makes while in prison goes back to pay for funeral costs and other expenses that we had to incur as a result of Zach dying. And I think the first check came in about 6 or 9 months later for $5.
Wow, Jesus. Well, you know what? That's $5 he doesn't deserve.
It's. I have a weird thought on that because that's like insulting, but it's also like,
yeah,
whatever he did, that.
Well, you're stripping.
That's what he. And you took the only thing that he had.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. That's a mind fuck. I don't know.
You know, guys, when I saw that, I thought, okay, obviously my son's life is, everybody's children are worth more than $5. But
Yeah.
I had to put in perspective. It could be $5 million, $5, $25,000. It's never really going to replace.
No.
A lot of media had asked me, do you feel there's justice? And I really had a hard time with that. How can I say there was justice? And I think the only way I can describe it is, for me to truly feel justice has been served is if this man was sent to a forced labor camp and build a time machine and bring Zach back Great. I'll call that justice. But that can't be done. That cannot happen. But because he's going to go away for 17 years, it's very significant in how it impacts his life. Because he'll be well past his 20s by then, and in late 30s, he's going to be in a different place. And I hope he finds atonement. I hope he finds a way to help prevent this from happening. But I do believe some measure of accountability has taken place, that he feels that accountability, but also equally important is that other young 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 28-year-olds who are trying to do the same thing or thinking of doing the same thing may think, well, wait a minute. This guy got 17 years, and that's not even a murder sentence. This is just involuntary manslaughter and a few others, and that led to 17 years. Okay, maybe I need to rethink taking that path of being a dealer. Unfortunately, it's super convenient, it's super easy, and Snapchat brings you your customers for free, and you make big bucks every month. And so it's very tempting, especially to a young guy who probably barely got through high school, cannot get into college, and doesn't want to entertain a minimum wage job at Taco Bell or whatever. I figured I'd go talk to that guy, the Corleone guy, who can hook me up with a bunch of pills, and then I can sell them for however many dollars, make profit. Next thing I know, I'm making $5,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month. A really good example is a classic example is what's called the Wyatt Pasek story, where in 1 year he built his business selling fake pills and made over $1 million a month.
Jeez.
He called himself the Oxy God. So if you search Oxy God on YouTube, you can see this kid. He's at the time 20, maybe 21, and he's flaunting all this cash in front of these supercars. He's in this bathtub full of cash. He bought these penthouses. I thought it was in London, but somewhere like that, in Newport Beach and Vegas, and he's just flaunting, look at me. And another 20-year-old may think, well, why do I have to go to school? Why I can just do that. $1 million a month? Are you kidding? Well, the DEA, this is all in Southern California, caught wind of all this and started tracking him. And they, of course, did a sting operation and caught him. And now he's serving 17 years as well. But what's sad is there are videos on YouTube put together by other young drug dealers that'll say, hey, how to be OxyGod without getting caught. This is what you should do and not do. So I think a big piece to this is social media absolutely needs to be reined in. And it's absolutely a wild west right now.
I totally agree.
Well, I think what's interesting is that this whole, up until December 27th, 2020, your life, what you've explained is a wild adventure. I mean, you talk about your military, the discipline, the time it took to fly, the near-death continuous experiences, and then this happens. And I admire the way that you're sharing this story, because I don't have kids, and I feel like I couldn't do it, and you're doing it. And not only that, is you're starting to educate younger people. I know you work very much involved with other programs. The Placer County, you go to schools, you talk to kids, and you educate them, which leads to the Alexander's Law, which is in the state of California, which I don't want to talk about that. Kyle, you can mention what you recently did and how you actually helped have that passed, because this is the change that I think is needed, and I think that's Zach's mission.
Yeah. Can I briefly explain Alexander's Law for those who may not know?
Yeah, please.
So Alexander's Law mirrors a Watson admonishment. So like Watson admonishment gives a warning to convicted DUI stories. Alexander's Law does the same for convicted drug dealers in honor of Alexandra Capelouto, who died from taking a fake pill when she came home for Christmas. And we really tried to make it simple, but to say, hey, you've been convicted of a drug. Here's this thing called fentanyl. Here's how lethal it is. Here's how it's packaged, how it's being exploited. And people, this is a serious drug. It's synthetic, and it very little can cause death. And you absolutely can't mess with this. Please stay away from this. Good luck. It's a non-punitive measure not to enhance a sentencing. However, if that dealer chooses to continue selling any kind of products that have fentanyl and someone dies, then it makes it easier for prosecutors to show implied malice. It also can be a charge up to murder. The hardest part of a conviction is to show implied malice. So when a prosecutor can say, hey, last month, last year, they received the Alexandra's Law admonishment. They knew about fentanyl, and yet they still continued to sell it. So we're upping up the game here, we're upping up the ante to bring harsher punishment. And it's easier to convince the courts that because you can show implied malice was present. Unfortunately, this measure was introduced to the California Public Safety Committees at the Senate and the Assembly floor 7 times. And every time it was shot down. It was not passed every single time. It was clear California legislators did not have the palate to do anything that even hints at potential increased incarcerations. And I can talk a lot about their talking points, but I totally disagree with it. So Matt and I, along with several DAs and the CDA, California District Attorneys Association, basically had formed together an idea, and they liked Alexandra's Law and introduced that or integrated that to Prop 36. Prop 36 was passed successfully here last November. It addresses the homelessness, the smash and grab or retail theft, as well as drug addiction and drug trafficking. And part of that includes Alexandra's Law.
And you're a co-sponsor of this.
Yeah, I'm an executive board member for a nonprofit called Victims of Illicit Drugs. And Matt is the founder of his own nonprofit, Stop Drug Dealers. And we wanted to add our education and our experiences and what we really believe. And we also felt it was important to try to explain this to that committee about why we think this is important, how effective it is. Of course, all the DAs, like our county's DA was 100% in support of it and helped author or co-author the actual bill itself. And then Matt and I would go to press conferences when asked. We went to help raise money at banquets to try to bring awareness. And of course, when it came time for any ballot measure, you need to get signatures. And we were out there helping people get signatures. So we were just trying to, put feet on the ground and educate and get signatures.
You did it.
We did. We needed 530 or so thousand signatures. We garnered 910,000, almost 1 million signatures. It was clear California was fed up with the homelessness, the smash and grab and drug problems in our counties. This is one of the only measures in decades where it passed overwhelmingly in all 58 counties. That's a measurable data point that you don't often see. Most ballot measures that do pass don't pass every county, but this one did, and it was overwhelmingly successful. Sadly, once the count was completed and it was verified that this ballot measure was allowed to be put on the ballot, it was twice that California legislators attempted to derail it. One of them was something that really insulted me personally, and I was absolutely offended. And the second one was offensive to Matt, Alexandra's dad, and her mom. And what they did is once California legislators knew this measure is going on the ballot because we got enough signatures, and the Secretary of State verified it. Overnight, legislators put together their own measures to address homelessness and fentanyl drug problems by putting their own measures out there, basically like what we had been asking, except the details of these measures watered it down so bad it was with no teeth. And it was kind of a waste. It's like if you pass that doesn't really do anything because it has these requirements that are almost unattainable when prosecuting. So it's really not worth its weight on paper. But they were selling it and advertising it as their new great fight to address the addiction problem, the drug trafficking problem. But when you look at it, there's no teeth. But they're addressing it, and they added something they called a poison pill. And what that means is they were saying, look at this great measure to deal with the drug trafficking. And if you vote for Prop 36 come November, then it'll automatically poison this bill and it'll disappear. So if you vote in favor for Prop 36, you're going to kill a really good bill we just passed. Why would they do that?
Yeah, because they didn't want Prop 36 to pass. I mean,
So
they wanted their stipulations.
So I went to a press conference and said, let the voters decide.
Make the decision. Yeah.
Don't try to trick them or persuade them. And I really have to ask. My son and his friends were tricked and sold a poison pill from a dealer, and he lost his life. So my question is, what's the real difference in the deception of a poison pill from a dealer or a politician? And then the next day, the Democrat legislation decided to drop those bills because the optics looked terrible. And about 2 weeks later, this is around the summertime of 2024, the chair of the Public Safety Committee came up with their own ballot initiative that they call it, I think, a constitutional amendment, where they can all vote as legislation and put a ballot to compete with Prop 36. However, and they were going to basically try to out-advertise, and hopefully people will vote for that and not Prop 36. And they had an Alexander's Law in it. This Alexander's Law required, from what I understood, that the prosecuting attorney has to prove that the person who died did not know there was fentanyl in there. Well, how do you prove that if they're dead?
Yeah, you can't.
Well, that was what they called Alexander's Law. What's really insulting here is none of them asked Matt or his wife, Alexandra's parents, if they can get permission to use her name on that measure.
Yeah.
And that measure was absolutely worthless. And once Matt learned they used my daughter's name on my dead daughter's name on a bill that's insulting to me, that's not going to work. So our assembly member, Joe Patterson, went to the floor and absolutely called him out and called it a total sham. And that night or the next day, Governor Newsom pulled that ballot initiative that they were trying to compete with. So
that's all pretty wild. How this all, how we operate now in law enforcement, charges that we now can file, the whole Prop 36. A lot of cops are very excited about it. A lot of people are excited about it, because it brings back accountability. And this is how that part of it is how it all started. So
the good news is Prop 36 did pass. I think it's
overwhelmingly
right, and it's a like a platform to help counties address the homelessness and retail theft,
a lot of things,
and obviously the drug trafficking problem.
Yeah.
I think it's a great start. There's more work to be done.
Yeah.
As far as social media piece goes, it is dangerous. Of all the parent nights I do, I try to bring out some of the harms on social media that many people don't know. And a lot of these harms involve very sadistic predation. There are predators out there who are grooming young people because they're young and they're impressionable, and they're tricking them into buying pills that are fake, that are lethal. Social media is unregulated. They don't need a license. You and I need a license to run a coffee shop or even drive a car. Social media needs no license, therefore they're unregulated. Social media is also part of an industry, the only industry, that has a federal law that protects them, that prevents anyone from even trying to sue them. No other industry has that. So you have an industry that's unregulated, and also they have a shield that no one can sue them.
That's wild.
That's the world we live in. And every time someone tries to pass a bill to regulate them, social media brings their big tech dollars and wins or buys out the committee members from voting yes to pass it. So we absolutely need to call them out on that.
We need to. But Chris, I mentioned at the beginning that this was going to be a lot of information in here, and there is a lot, and we have to have you back. Like, it has been an absolute honor to sit across from you. We pre-talked about this, some of this, and I think you held back on a lot of stuff on the phone because you've covered an amazing. This was a phenomenal podcast. Your career in the military, you're giving. It's hard for me to even put that into words. I'm very honored to sit across from you. Your efforts in the military to save people's lives, the things that you've experienced, you breaking down discipline, all of that is so valuable, and I really appreciate you sharing that. And most importantly, for you to come on here and talk about Zach passing away December 27th, 2020, of somebody that was a really, really good kid. I mean, you shared so much about him. I feel like we know him. It's actually, I kind of get choked up talking about it. But sometimes it feels like people stick around for a short period of time because what they're really meant to do is even more. And that clearly is through you that Zach is coming through you, and you're changing California for sure, but that's going to cross the country in saving people's lives. And I think you said it was 22 high schoolers die every hour?
Every week.
22 high schoolers die every week from fentanyl poisoning. Yeah. This is insane. It should not continue. And you are doing an amazing job. And to sit across from somebody that co-sponsored a bill that is changing people's lives, that are very thrilled for this. This is an absolute honor. I can continue and go on, but it is amazing to meet you. And you're so humble, and Tom Cruise looks up to you, not just because you're a real fighter jet fighter, but you also have better hair than he does.
Thanks, I appreciate it. But no, I've been asked, why are you doing this? Is it hard? And I said, it is hard, but it's harder not to. And it was really relevant to me after our first interview with KCRA. About a month or so afterwards, it was very fresh. It was really painful to talk to them. Instead of a 2-minute segment, they turned it into a 30-minute program, and they did a phenomenal job with it. Well, around 6 to 8 weeks later, I had 3 different families come to me. They seeked me out, and they said, we saw your story, and we're so sorry what happened. But I had never heard of a fake pill, and I had no clue you can buy drugs for free, essentially with no restrictions on social media. So I forced my high school kid to sit down and watch that program. And just like your kid, he's a straight A student, very successful, a team captain, and great kid. I just thought, well, this wouldn't happen to my family, but I still want to tell my child. And guess what? They just admitted they bought a pill last night or that day. And they were shocked. Wait, why would you buy a pill? You wouldn't buy a pill. Like, well, actually, we all do. Everybody buys pills. That's what we do in our generation. And the parents did not expect that, and they were shocked. Well, these 3 families had those pills tested. And guess what?
Yeah, fentanyl was in them.
They would have died. Mm-hmm. And so those parents said, look, in all seriousness, it's obvious that was hard for you to talk about because it was fresh. But had you not talked about it, my child would have been the next victim.
Yeah.
And that story, I'm just a messenger. This young man's story saved my child. And we felt obligated to come seek you out, tell you how grateful we are. Our child is alive because of that. And that really kind of shook me to my core that, okay, I have to share this story. And I believe it at the cellular level that there is a minefield out there. We can teach this to our younger generation because how they live and see the world is from a very different lens than when I was in middle school or high school. And we, as adults, have to kind of look through their lens and say, okay, this thing called prescription pills, you can't just do that. You know, a high school fullback got hurt on practice Tuesday, didn't want to miss Friday night's game. He's like, I'm not missing a game. And I know I can't convince my parents' doctor to give me an oxycodone, but I'll go to Snapchat and get one. Or the young girl who had a public breakup and she can't deal with the anxiety, so she gets on social media to get her own Xanax. Or the kid who was worried they'll flunk out, so they get their own Adderall so they can focus. Well, all these young kids are dead because they thought they were getting an authentic product for whatever they needed it for. And no one told him that actually there's no Percocet, there's no Adderall, there's no oxycodone here. This is only fentanyl, and it's going to make your heart stop.
Wow.
So that message needs to get out.
Well, Chris, I echo what Mark says. I'll shake your hand. I'm
Thank you,
closer.
brother.
Thank you very much for coming. That was amazing. And thank you for your service, everything that you've done for our community, the state level. And like Mark said, I think this is going to go far beyond into the nation. And so thank you for everything.
Be back. Thank you for your service and your respectful attention and having this platform as a way to get a good message out.
Absolutely. You are welcome anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.